Hey everyone, welcome to Buzzing About Romance Happy Hour Edition. I am your host, Becky, and joining me in the co host chair tonight is Amanda. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, everybody.
And I am super excited. We have a debut author. I'm so excited. A
Hi.
baby author. Yay. Joining us tonight is author Myah Ariel, and we are super excited to be here to celebrate the release of When I Think of You, which is your debut offering. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here talking with you about the book.
We're so excited. So the rules of the night is if you're watching, you can ask all the questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them. If you're watching this on a replay, ask the questions in the comments and we will come back and answer them. So you can ask all the questions. In the description of the video are all the links and places to connect with Myah. I think both Amanda and I follow you on Threads, and I was following you
Yes.
on Threads before your publicist reached out to me because I was obsessed with your handle.
Oh,
Yes.
Because you're meet cute Myah,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
love that.
Oh, yeah. I was like, romance girlies and people will get it.
Yeah.
Not if you're not in the romance sphere. I've had some people be like, what is a meet cute? What is Maya meets cute? What is this? But the people who get it get it. It's one of those if you know things.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, but meet cute also could be like movies and TVs because,
yes, yeah,
and
yeah,
we're going to get into that because you have a really interesting background coming
yeah.
into romance. And so it makes sense even, for like the
Yeah.
TV movie aspect of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I actually had a friend last night asking me what a meet cute was, and I was like, "Have you seen The Holiday?"
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yes, it's a classic, a modern classic, but yes, definitely an homage to cinema and
Yes.
screenwriting. So yeah.
Our family actually has chicken Alfredo on Christmas Eve now because of the
Oh,
holiday.
really? Wow.
Yes. That's
Now
our
I want
Christmas.
chicken Alfredo. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
So we're gonna kick things off kind of in our traditional way. It is Thursday, Friday Eve. But it's actually you're on the West Coast.
Yes.
So you're a
So it's
cup.
bright outside for
So
me
it's like
here.
dinner time.
Yeah.
But we always like to ask, what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, this is okay. I put it in a glass because I wanted to look, fancy, but it's a peach LaCroix.
Yum. Yum. Um,
I went out, I had my book launch last night. We went out and had all the drinks last night. So today I'm feeling a little worse for wear. So I'm trying to just keep my fluids up.
Today is
Hydrate.
the day we hydrate.
Yeah.
Amanda, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm boring. I'm just drinking water with my little buzzing sticker.
And your little
Um,
buzzing sticker.
yeah.
I actually, Mike and I went to the Costco a couple weeks ago, and we got a sampler pack of Sam Adams because I love sampler packs.
Ooh.
I'm kind of a fool for them, so I'm drinking a cherry wheat from their summer collection.
Ooh,
Ooh,
Um,
fun.
it has some really good samples in it. Anyway, I like variety. Variety is the spice of life.
it is.
Um, so Myah, let's take a moment to get to know you. I hinted at your background. So tell everybody because it's interesting. Your book is what we would call a Hollywood norm romance. So
Yeah.
it is set in the backdrop of LA and TV movie production. Um,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about your writing a Hollywood romance and where the inspiration came from.
Yeah, well, so the main character of this novel, her name is Kalia Wilson, and her trajectory is loosely and sometimes not so loosely inspired by my own. She comes from Arkansas, as I do, and she is just someone who has been enamored of film and cinema since childhood and has these dreams of sort of breaking out of her hometown and going off to study the movies in the big city. And she has always had these romanticized visions of New York City. And so she goes off to film school to study cinema and film school. And within hours of arriving, has a meet cute with Danny, who comes from the opposite background. He is the son of a legendary Hollywood director. His mother is an intellectual and academic, a professor. He is in and of this world. Of these sort of like artistic filmic people, but they have this shared love of cinema, and it's sort of a friends to lovers fast fall into this beautiful romance, but it crashes and burns as often early college romances do. And so this is a second chance romance because years later they meet on the other coast in Hollywood, and Kalia's career is totally stalled in many ways, like mine was. Kalia is a Hollywood receptionist at a production studio. I was a Hollywood receptionist at a production studio. And Danny is now a hotshot rising star director, and he's working on this prestigious film production. And so we're looking at the different career paths they have and how their paths have diverged. And now that they're reuniting, how's it going to work out?
Yeah. I felt so like Danny, as I'm reading him, I'm like, oh, the Nepo baby.
Exactly. Yes, definitely the Nepo baby. That's the buzzword.
Yeah. But he wasn't arrogant. And I liked how you did that. I don't know. Did you find him arrogant, Amanda?
No, not at all,
Like,
surprisingly.
I thought, okay, at first when like we're getting to know him, I'm like, okay, dude's gonna be an asshole. Like I know it. Like this is
Yeah.
where we're going. And then he wasn't. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say Danny's privilege, I think, is displayed more in his blind spots as opposed to him being
Yes.
an arrogant person. It's more of like, you don't know what you don't know. And so him being open to listening, even though he does make a ton of mistakes because of those blind spots, because he hasn't had to struggle in the same way that Kalia has, that's sort of where his pitfalls come from.
Well, and I really liked Kalia. She was, although I did feel bad at her as I'm reading the first chapter, I thought, oh, yeah, that sucks. Because she
Yeah.
just was like kind of that monotonous receptionist. Like, this is not where she wants to be.
It was
Yeah.
so relatable. It was so relatable because I've been in those jobs, and I think so many of us have been in those jobs. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's what I love about writing is that even if you haven't been a receptionist at a movie studio on a studio lot, like you have been in a job where you're answering calls, you're at everyone's beck and call, you're, sweeping up coffee ground spilled in the kitchen, and not that there's anything wrong with these jobs. I think even say that
no.
if this is what works for you, but if you have dreams of doing something else and you came into this because it was supposed to be a stepping stone, and that's how, especially in the entertainment industry, a lot of these jobs, and for me, they were presented as you come in on the ground floor and you work your way up. Like everyone has to do this in order to get to that next step. But the idea was that you only do it for like 6 months at tops. You don't do it for 3 years.
Right. You have to pay your
So,
dues, give
exactly.
your time, then
Yeah.
then you'll get your break.
Yeah.
Um, so writing a story, why write romance? Why not, make it because you do there this is spicy. It's a little bit of a slower burn. It takes them
Yeah.
a minute to get there. And I wasn't sad about it. I tend to be mean to slippers. But there was so
It
much
made sense.
chemistry. It made sense, but there was so much chemistry between these two because I think there was one moment where I'm like, Crike almighty, could these people just get it on?
But that's what you want with the slow burn.
Right,
You
right.
It
want to like
is.
have people like literally about to pull their hair out, and then at like the 65-70% mark, you're like, all right, here you go.
Yeah. I'm like, friend, they're desperate. Could someone give them the chance? So why write romance?
Because I've been a hopeless romantic since I was probably too young to even be one, before I even understood what romance was. I just even in films and stories that weren't romance films, I always gravitated towards those storylines.
Yeah.
In television shows that might have been action packed or like Alias, for example. I was always gravitating toward the romance storyline of Alias. Like that is why I watched Alias. Because of, are they going to get back together? Like he thought she was dead, but I mean, sorry, I recently, not recently, but like over the pandemic, I rewatched all of Alias, but
Yeah.
that's just like, that's an example. So, but then I would gravitate towards, and I've said this a lot in talking about this book, growing up, being born at the end of the night, at the end of the 80s and growing up throughout the 90s, I felt just sort of immersed, particularly in Black romance on television, whether it was watching Living Single or A Different World, or just, or in towards the early aughts, shows like Girlfriends. I would watch Girlfriends,
Oh,
interestingly enough, with my grandfather. He loved that show.
Oh,
I loved Girlfriends. And
Yeah.
actually, it's so funny because, like, In Living Color is a book, and then Martin, or In Living Color, the TV show, and then Martin, those are not TV shows that people talk about, but I'm older than you, quite a bit older than you. And
Yes.
those, like, I loved those shows. I actually preferred Martin
Yeah.
to like Friends.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
liked it. I thought it was funnier and
Yeah.
more relatable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I even think now, like rewatching some episodes of Friends, I'm like, it's not landing the way that I thought. Cause I watched
No.
Friends. I was like, I was in on the, but said all that to say, like, I felt like the 90s were, even just in mainstream, they were just like this booming decade for romance, rom-coms. I remember my mom taking my sister and I to go see You've Got Mail in theaters. And I just like fell in love with the chunky knit sweaters and just like the
oh yeah.
fall feeling of New York City and the how charming Tom Hanks was in that, and just the idea of them. I just remember thinking, how are they typing and not looking at their fingers? Granted, I was 9. I was like, how
Right.
do they type? And like email was such a new concept at the time, but they're writing these emails to each other. And so I've always just gravitated toward love stories,
Yeah.
and always just dreamed them up in my head as I was falling asleep at night. And so that's just always been what's inspired me most, is the love piece of any story. So
Yeah.
what if I was going to write a story, that was going to be a huge part of it for sure.
It's always funny to me how many authors, when I say, like, so your romance started with movies, so Nora Ephron was really your
Yeah.
inspiration. And they
Yeah.
always look at me and they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, because I am old.
And
Because I
she's
watched
timeless.
all those.
She's timeless
She
though, you
is.
know?
She is.
Yeah. Carrie Winfrey has her book, her couple series of books that are like read like love letters to Nora Ephron. And
Oh
I'm just
wow.
like, yeah, okay, I'm in. Thank you. Um, it's funny because you talk about Alias and the romance, and I always think people missed out Scandal, which
Yeah.
was so bonkers, but it had
Yeah.
one of the greatest slow burn,
Yeah.
forbidden, taboo romances of like
Yeah.
television ever.
Yeah, I remember that. I was talking to an author friend of mine about season 1 of Scandal, and I don't remember what episode it was where they sort of unveiled the backstory with Olivia and Fitz, but it was like several episodes into season 1 where they even dropped the bomb, and it was just, what? Like this campaign trail, and it was just like, oh my, and then from then on, you're just like hooked on this toxic pairing that is just
So
so
toxic.
sizzling. It's so toxic, but it's intoxicating at the same time. And that's just a mark of like really good writing, obviously.
Yes, obviously.
Um, but yeah.
It's one of those where you're like, what? I can't look away. But if that was a romance novel, you probably wouldn't read it because, like,
Yeah.
cheating and
Yeah.
slow burn.
All of the landmines that, turn people away.
But I could not watch that. Um, so do you have a favorite trope to read or write?
So I mean, this is gonna sound like a cheat, but second chance romance for me is, the reason why I gravitate toward it is because I love angst and I love mess. And I feel like you've already got all this built-in angst. I love that first meet cute when they're seeing each other again after so much time, and there's all this sort of built-in like attraction, and there's just this heaviness and this weight behind it, and you're just so curious to know like what happened between these people, why didn't it work. And I just think those moments are so fun to write, and then to unpack and peel back all of the layers. And I also think it kind of builds for um when they do end up, because we know there's a happily ever after, when they do end up coming together in the end. I hopefully, if you, as an author, if you've done your job right, it kind of builds for a more um maybe healthy pairing again, because you've worked through all of these wounds and challenges together. You've already broken up once, you've already had to overcome all of that baggage, and now that you're together again, I kind of I believe a little bit more in your chances moving forward. So I just feel really invested in second chance romance. That said, I have a lot of fun with friends to lovers, because I just love the idea of someone pining after the other, and then the other one just having to open their eyes a little bit to realize the person you've been looking for has been next to you this whole time. I just feel like that's very romantic.
Yeah. It does. It is romantic, friends to lovers.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting because you love Second Chance, and I think Second Chance is one of those books or tropes that you can get away with not having as much miscommunication, because the
Yeah.
miscommunication would have all happened the first time.
Right.
So
Right.
it does feed in a little bit more to the lack of third act breakups and stuff like that. Friends to lovers is a little harder for me to believe, because I always wonder, like, what was it that you didn't,
Right.
why didn't you see it? Like,
Yeah.
um, when my husband and I were doing our pre-marriage stuff, we were married Catholic, and we had a priest tell us once that he always worried about the couples that had been together for like 5 years and living together that were still just now starting, to get engaged. He
Uh-huh.
always worried a little bit about those couples because, like, why weren't you pulling the trigger? And I feel that way about friends to lovers. Like,
Yeah.
why didn't you pull that trigger? What were you missing?
Yeah, it makes me think about people we meet on vacation, because it's like a friends to lovers, but there was like a little blip.
Yeah,
And after that blip, there was mess.
right.
And then feelings, and then we're not friends anymore. So again, I love angst and I love mess. So if there's a way that you can complicate like maybe we tried and then it ruined our friendship, and now and I'm very much into that whole idea of right person, wrong time. And we just kind of have
Yeah.
to, live life a little bit and grow into the people that, at
Yeah.
some point are right for each other. Like I think that can blend into several different tropes.
And
So
I can do friends to lovers second chance. I can do
yes,
that
Yes.
because you
yeah,
Yes,
got
you
the
can.
angst, but I need the tension.
yeah.
Amanda, you like friends to lovers though.
I do like friends to lovers, but when we did our whole episode, I think I leaned a little more towards friends to lovers that were also maybe like later in life, or
Uh,
people that had had a separation for a time.
So the second chance
So,
friends to
yeah, a little
lovers.
bit, yeah.
Um, it's so funny. Isn't it funny how different tropes hit different people different ways?
For sure. Like for me, one of my most difficult tropes to really lean into is fake dating, because I'm always just like in like a contemporary scenario. I just don't think it's ever that deep.
Yeah.
I just don't really know if I can fully believe a scenario where it's that necessary to pretend that you're dating someone.
It is my catnip. It is one of
I love
those.
it too.
It's
Yeah.
one of those you're like, I always love because I love one bed
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
wall of pillows because that's so realistic,
Well,
right?
I like that in a second chance, where it's
Yes.
like now we're forced proximity and we're on a work trip together, and the hotel is out of rooms, and or the way that in Before I Let Go, that's again one of my favorites. But I will say a scenario that I do think fake dating is practically realistic is in the Hollywood situation, because of PR relationships.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Ava Wilder's has I'm blanking on the title. um but I think her debut was that scenario.
Yeah.
So,
Kylie Scott has a bunch of them. Like with her
oh,
rock stars and with her
yeah,
Hollywood. She
yeah.
she absolutely likes to give us the fake dating
I
because of the
wonder
pop.
if I don't think I've ever read like a fake not dating. Like you're dating but you're trying to make it look like you're not, because it's a forbidden
Oh.
situation. Ooh, maybe
Okay,
I've come
I'm
up
going to
with like a
need you to
book
write
idea.
that now.
I know, maybe I need to like email my editor after this and be like, What about?
Yeah.
Because I would buy that. I'm just saying. How to Fake It in Hollywood. Ava Wilder, she did
There
that.
we go.
It was,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
was
a
not.
good one.
I've read the book, and I was not going to pull that title out of my head tonight. It's release week, and
You have big things on your
it was
brain.
nowhere near the edges of my mind. But now that you say it, yes, that is
Yeah.
it.
Well, and actually, it's so funny because this is one of those books, you guys, that Becky picked up because of the cover. I
Oh yeah,
borrowed it
yeah,
from the Hoopla for the audiobook. I was scrolling and I was like, oh,
oh,
look.
yeah, yeah. I love that cover.
I'm like, yeah, I need that cover.
The sunglasses are so LA.
Well, and I have to tell you, one of the reasons I did buy your book is yours is an illustrated cover and they have faces.
Yes,
And that is my current, like,
obsession.
my
Yes.
current hate on illustrated and vector covers
Okay.
when they have no faces.
Yeah.
And they have no face, but they have a beard and sunglasses, but no
Oh,
nose.
I've seen some of that. Well, I will say I have to take this opportunity to shout out my cover artist, Obo Moses, who is so talented, so incredibly talented. I feel so lucky. And he's also doing my second book cover, which I've seen sketches of already. And I just am
Did
so
he do Natalie Kenya's
I don't
books?
know. Let's see.
Because
That's a
that
good
name
question.
sounds really familiar. Like I should know that name.
Yeah, your
Um,
cover is gorgeous.
well, and I looked at your cover and it looks like watercolors, like the
Yes.
slurring of and the blending of the colors, and it just had such a great artistic vibe to it.
Uh-huh.
And again, they had faces, and I loved that.
Yes, and I love the faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The next cover has faces too, and they are stunning.
Well, and I like that they had like her hair because that's how
Yeah,
her hair is in the book. You know,
yeah,
like I got it and I got who she was and you know, I think that that's something that can be hard for, you know, black romances sometimes is the cover feels like it's they just didn't put that thought into it. Like they just did what they could, especially indie
yeah,
authors. And I'm
yeah.
like, I want to see the black hairstyles. I want
Yeah.
to
That
embrace
that
that.
was a specific conversation with, and have to credit my editor, Essie Soga. I have to credit Berkley and their art team. That was a conversation where they asked me, like, I created a Pinterest board where I had photos of like actors that this is who I see, this is the hair texture, this is the curl pattern, this
Yeah.
is the height, the skin tone. Like we got very granular about it because that representation is important. And that's another, like there's always these conversations about illustrated versus not. And when it comes particularly to BIPOC characters, when you're looking for, if there's no budget to like hire models to do a photo shoot, then you're looking at art that you have to purchase or stock
Yeah.
photos, and then you're limited.
Yeah.
So with illustration, especially when you have an artist that is like Obo Moses, like the sky is the limit with what you're able to create.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like I got so lucky.
It's great. And like I said, I was excited to see that because I know that I've talked to other BIPOC authors that covers are a source of frustration.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like Alexandria House, she pretty much does them herself now because she
Yeah.
can't find what she
Yeah.
wants. So she's like,
Right.
I just learned how to do them. I'm like, you go for it.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with size as well, and also with disability. Like there's just all of any sort of marginalization, like when it comes to representation on covers, it's just really important to get it right. So
Yeah. Well, and that cover is gorgeous. Like I said, as soon as I was done, I was like, oh, I will be running. And I saw you where you had signed copies. And I'm like, buy now.
yeah,
Because I really need more books.
Yeah, she accidentally sent it to me before we knew we were
Yes.
even interviewing you. And she was like, oh, I accidentally sent you a book. She's like, you don't have to do anything with it. And I opened it and I was like, well, I want to read this. So,
I do that often. The people at Berkley, you know, they send me the like NetGalley widgets and they're like, read this, see if this fits your show or whatever. And I'm always like, oh, okay. And so I send them to our team sometimes so they can read them and help me with feedback. And I was like, oh, I did not mean to send. That was like for me. And she's like, nope, I'm reading this. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, I'm glad.
Well, that cover, I'm probably assessing a little bit. Okay, so we know that your inspiration is Hollywood, and because you have lived Hollywood, what were the challenges in writing a Hollywood romance? Especially because you don't want to make it too ugly. Because I don't know how your experience, and are you still working within the Hollywood industry now?
No.
No. Look at her. She's like,
I
no.
pivoted.
So what were some of the challenges in writing Hollywood for you?
I mean, for me, it was really cathartic because I was so far removed. The I left aspiring to work my way up in 2015, 20. So I had been several years removed at that point. So it was kind of like I had the privilege of like space and time to kind of look back. And I'd been working in academia for a really long time, doing things totally different, still working in sort of media communications, journalism. So and also when you're in LA, you're never too far removed from the entertainment industry, but I wasn't still striving anymore. So it really felt almost like journaling. And I don't know that there were any challenges other than just I'm wanting to blend, you know, it's not a memoir. So I wanted to be able to, I always say that this book is inspired by the movies, real life, and imagination. So it's a mixture of all of those things. And so also just learning the craft, because this is the first book that I've written. And so wanting to learn the craft of storytelling and figuring out how to turn my experience into a compelling story that had plot and story beats and character development and all of those things. So yeah, but I feel like the actual Hollywood experience really was sort of like a vehicle that pushed it forward. And then things just kept happening in the real world that were kind of reflecting what was in the book. Like, you know, this last summer, we had two major guilds go on strike, and people started talking about equity, pay equity, and the value of labor and the value of creative labor versus CEOs being paid millions and millions of dollars, and how streaming has affected. And then we had actresses of color speaking out about injustice or inequities that they were facing. And so that to me was really validating that even though I wrote this book, drafted it 3 years ago, now it's coming out and these conversations are still really timely.
Yeah. It's really interesting reading it from this perspective and how like Kalia talks about the equity and, you know, all the things that she has to go through. It was just like another kind of realization that Hollywood has more than just the major stars.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, that there's other people involved, showrunners, writers.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the book. There are unions for couriers on the lot, like people who deliver packages. There's a union for that. There are people that drive prints of films around town to get them to theater, like even like the physical digital copies of the films. And it's all like a well-oiled machine. So Hollywood is definitely you know, and that's why the strikes were so interesting, because I think you got to see all these people picketing, and you know, there were some notable faces on the picket lines, but most of the people that you saw picketing were just sort of either journeyman actors or people in writers' rooms that were sending their kids to school just like regular folks. And so yeah, it kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
It was really interesting. We did a last year. We spoke to an author who is part of the Writers Guild, and his book was coming out, and it was still the beginning of the strike back in May. And he's like, it's hard to kind of like, I'm okay, but I don't want to. And he's like, it's a balance.
Yeah.
And again, like, especially with this book, when I think of you, we did get a lot of kind of those Hollywood nuances.
Yeah.
So I kind of liked the peek behind the screen.
Yeah. I wanted it to feel accessible, and that's why I wanted there to be like a movie production that they're doing rather than me just like telling you all these things. I wanted to show like them having casting conversations, them having a production meeting, them working through the script and tweaking things, location scouting and things like that. So you kind of pick up the sort of inside baseball a little bit, but you're seeing them do it as opposed to, just throwing it out there with these sort of convoluted descriptions.
Yeah.
So
Amanda, I'm gonna sneeze. Do you have any questions? I'm trying to
So did you, when you were working as a receptionist, were you a part of any of those meetings as well? Did you get to kind of get in on that
yeah, so
situation?
what's really interesting is that as I was on the reception desk, I was there for about 3 years. 1 year as receptionist, and then I did get promoted to like office coordinator, where you kind of get to um move about the office and then just be like everybody's assistant.
Oh, okay.
And so that's when you're in the mailroom. But every Monday morning, we had a distribution meeting where the entire company would get together in the conference room, and our head of distribution would go over the weekend box office, and not just like the films that we had put out, but all the competition. And so
Oh,
I would
wow.
attend these meetings, and they were optional for me, but I always attended these meetings and soaked everything up like a sponge, and just learned everything about the marketing, the numbers, what's going on across town at this lot, what's going on at that lot. And I also would take meetings with all of the executives up in development and production and ask them, if there's scripts that are coming across your desk. And they would have this thing called coverage, which is where they're getting inundated with scripts. So they would have interns and assistants that would read them first. And then you sort of write a 1-pager of summary, like, what's this about? What's your recommendation? And at the end, should I read it or not? Is it a hard pass or a strong consider? And so it's like, I'm at the reception desk twiddling my thumbs, send me scripts to read. So I was constantly reading scripts. And so you see Kalia
That's
at the
fun.
front desk listening to an audiobook. Like that was what I would be doing sort of in my downtime. And at a certain point, I sort of got elevated to not just writing coverage, but giving notes on scripts. So if they were
Oh,
working with
wow.
a writer and there was a project that was kind of, being workshopped, they would ask me, what are your thoughts on this? How can we work on the second act here? And so then beyond that, I would work our guild screenings. So if we had films that we were showing to voters at the DGA, or if it was pre-award season, I would go work the check-in desk at the screening. So I'd get to know members of the guild. And then I would literally, like during the after the screening, they would literally like go in the bathroom and stand in a stall and have a notepad and like take notes of like what you hear people saying about what did they like who did they, what's the feedback, because people go in the bathroom after a screening and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I hated that part where so and so did XYZ. So I would literally go in the bathroom, sit in a stall, and see if I could hear any kind of feedback. And so I would also work the movie premieres, and I would get assigned sometimes to work in the parking garage. So when like the VIPs would come in, I would like tell them where to park and escort them up to the screening room for the movie premiere. So I was literally throwing myself at every opportunity I could just to like get the exposure and network and learn all of the different facets of the industry, to see not only like where is my best fit, but just to kind of be a sponge and soak everything in. And not only that, but I had sort of the academic background from going to film school in New York, where you're learning, the history of the
Yeah.
film industry, but then you're getting the practical experience too. And then after all of that, I was still constantly being told, you're too green, you're too green, you're too green. So
Okay, but could you imagine publishing like the Wednesday after the New York Times or the Thursday after New York Times list drops, like in whole publishing meeting where they talk
yeah,
about all the sales and like what book is doing. Could you imagine that? Like that is fascinating to me that that happens in film, because I can't imagine any other industry like having whole office meetings going
I'm
over
surprised that they don't. I'm kind of like, do they not do that in publishing? Do they not have
the different
meetings?
labels will do it, but not like you're not, they wouldn't dissect it. It would be more
Gotcha.
like how much do you think, because it's publishing is a lot of like, again,
Yeah.
nuances like film, but it's publishing is a lot of like, well, how much do you think they spent? What do you think the budget was?
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah.
why did that book make the paperback, but it didn't make ebook, and
Right.
you
And
know,
then with Hollywood, things are reported more openly. Like you can
right,
go on IMDb and see the budget for these
right,
films. You can,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, you
So,
can see, and
and you know,
you,
like the marketing spend, like,
yeah,
and then, if whatever they spent in the US, they're going to double it for international, like, what they
yeah,
offered on if they acquired it at a festival, like all of that stuff gets reported.
yeah.
So,
Publishing still likes to keep as much of it behind
yeah,
closed
when you
doors.
think about it, like the movie industry is reported on in ways that publishing isn't. Like
No,
you've got
yeah,
these legacy trades that are like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, the Wrap, like even and newer ones like the Wrap, like they are reporting on what's going on in Hollywood. Like
yeah.
it's heat. So
Well, and Hollywood has many more unions and disclosures that happen that publishing still gets away with quite a bit of not having
that's
to
true.
have. Um, but we'll talk about that later. When I think of you is emotional. Did you were you trying to make us cry? Was that the goal? You're like,
I
you,
think it's a reflection of like that when I wrote it, it was 2021. It was, the pandemic. So I had my first son, my son, I only have one son, but I had my first kid, May of 2020.
oh,
And so that was sort of
Wow.
like a harrowing time to become a mom.
yeah,
And then we ended up, my son was born with a serious medical condition. And so we ended up spending the majority of his first year in living in the hospital. And so when I was in the hospital, I was reading a lot of romance to kind of just sort of, you're alone in the hospital during a pandemic, like you can't have any visitors. You're literally just there by yourself. So I was reading a lot of romance books as an escape. And when we finally got him out and stable, it was early 2021. And I was thinking, I'm inspired. Like I've always done like journalistic writing or an analytical writing for film. I feel like I have the story. I just want to see if I could write a book. And so it was an emotional time. And then I think, when you say it's emotional, there's this whole grief storyline with Danny and his father. And not to bring down the conversation, but my mom passed away the summer of 2021 as well.
that's a
And so it
lot.
was sort of like a perfect storm for all of these emotional, heavy things to be happening. And I feel like it just kind of bled onto the page. And I sort of just wrote what I was feeling at the time. And again, that was sort of like the journaling aspect of writing this.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
It
Yeah.
makes sense
Like,
because there was a lot, and I was like, and I'm not a crier, but I was just like, what is she doing to me? Because this is
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. And I can relate because I'm a mom of a medically fragile child. Well, now he's an adult, but I get the lonely moments in the hospital and
Yeah. Yeah.
romance kind of being that saving grace, that
Yeah.
escape.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also when I rewatched Alias.
Fair. It's so funny because you say that, but like my hospital experience was in 2003. Well, my
Okay.
first. I mean,
Uh-huh.
he had ongoing. Anyway, my
Right.
first experience was 2003, and there were not really laptops then.
Oh yeah.
And we did get a laptop from like my husband's uncle brought us his laptop or something, and they actually gave us like the Ethernet cable to plug into the hospital's
Wow.
Ethernet, their network, and like
Wow.
nobody would do that today. Like unsecured
Yeah.
network. It's so
It's
funny.
a different time. It's a different time.
Yeah. Um, so what I mean, did you have any other questions? No.
no.
Myah, what is next? So um When I Think of You is out now. It's available wherever you get books. I was so excited. It was in my Libby app for my local library. They already had it because I like to go in and request. Especially if I love a book, like I want it in my library system. So, but it was already
Oh,
there. I was like, good.
dang.
And there was a
Yeah.
wait for it, just so you know.
Oh,
I was
someone told me today that someone DM'd me that their wait was 12 weeks. And I was like, I don't know like if that's good or bad, but I was like, oh cool, there's a wait.
I was one of 7 and it was 16 weeks. So,
Oh my gosh.
and that's
Wow.
in, small town Ohio. So, you know.
Wow.
So what is next for you?
So next is a second book that I can't be super specific about, but it is a romance. I'm like really excited about this book. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be fun too. It's inspired by, I will say this. I love Mariah Carey. I think it's in my Instagram bio that I'm a Mariah Carey stan. And this book is inspired by a Mariah Carey song titled The Roof
Okay.
off her Butterfly album. So, if anyone listening or watching wants to go give that song a spin, that is the song that inspired my second novel, which is, is going to happen. I don't even know if I could talk about the date. I don't know. But
Okay.
there's a second book coming. So that's what's next. And I have more book ideas for more books. I even have an idea for a book about some of the secondary characters and When I Think of You. So,
I was going to say there were still a couple of characters in this book
yeah,
and I loved this world. So I was
yeah.
hoping we weren't leaving it completely.
Yeah, there might even be some things already written. So
Oh,
yes, there's definitely the possibility of more from this group of people. So
Okay. Okay.
that's exciting.
Does anybody have any questions that's here in the chat? So do you have a favorite Hollywood meet story from when you were a receptionist?
oh, like person I
Yeah.
met.
Or like so I'm stupid sometimes and I will actually meet people but not realize that I met somebody.
Okay.
And when they walk away, someone will be like, "You know who that was, right?" And I'll be like, "No, I have no clue. Who is that?" And they'll be like, "Oh, that was so and so." And I'm like, "No clue. No
I
clue."
will always say it's tough to answer because I've attended the Golden Globes 3 times.
Oh,
And
fun.
so and in that also, and one of my jobs was to work like the check-in tables for the after parties. And everyone attends the Golden Globes after parties. And so I've checked in everyone from like Kathy Hilton to like Olympic gold medalists to, I mean, I've seen like Meryl Streep, like everybody. But I will say, in terms of like my favorite interactions, Kirsten Dunst was the absolute most angelic, sweet, kindest, just like person who sat down at reception and didn't like ignore me or treat me like the help, but just actually conversed and was just super kind. And I brought her coffee and it was, or maybe it was tea, I don't remember, but she was just super,
Yeah.
super kind. Anna Faris was the same way. Eva Mendes, like
Oh,
lovely, lovely. So those are three that stand out as some of the like
That's
just
awesome.
kind of interactions. And then there are some people which I won't say that were not at all, like we're just like not it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
no.
I mean, I have author stories like that, but we won't talk about that.
One of them I don't think would surprise anybody, but I will not say.
No, fair. 100% fair. Myah, thank you so much for coming on and talking about um, When I Think of You. So this title does not, I keep wanting to say When I Think About You, which is,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that's not the
yes.
title, but
Well, it's based on the Janet Jackson song,
Yeah.
which is
right.
When I Think of You. So just think of, again, I'm inspired by music. So think of that song, play that song, and maybe it'll help.
Well, my problem is so I'm obviously a little older. There was a song in the 90s called When I Think About You by the
Okay.
Flaming Lips.
Okay.
Anyway, and it's
Well, I
not
think this Janet song was like 1987, 88.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those songs that when you hear it, you're like, oh, I know this
song.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody asked, would you ever think about writing a script, being a screenwriter?
Well, so it's one of those daunting things that I would really love to do, but I find dialogue, it's funny to say this as someone who just wrote like a 370-page book, but dialogue is scary to me. And a script is like so heavily, like it's
Yeah.
obviously the dialogue is the point. But yeah, that's one of the things that I would love to do at some point.
Well,
So
I will say the dialogue was phenomenal in When I Think of You.
yeah.
So you got it, even
Thank
if you
you.
didn't
Took
love
some
it.
revision, took some work to get there. It doesn't come naturally to me. But yeah, writing a screenplay would be that's one of my next like writer goals, is to write, or maybe TV, maybe something
Yeah.
for TV. Yeah.
Awesome. That would be so awesome. Again, Myah, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight.
Yes.
Everybody, you can find When I Think of You available wherever you get books. If you follow Myah on Instagram, in her link is the link to, it's a Black-owned bookstore in
Yes.
Los Angeles.
Yes.
That might not be a signed copy, but if you're going to order a paperback, I highly recommend that you go and check out the Reparation Club bookstore. Yeah.
Yes, they are fabulous. They hosted my book launch, and they're just like, if you're ever in LA, go visit their store. They sell vinyls. They sell, like, it's just the most beautiful, welcoming. They're
I got their
amazing.
newsletter today because, when I did the pre-order, now I'm on their newsletter, and there were all these events listed, and I'm like, I want to go.
Oh yeah, they do a ton. They do a ton of events.
They had really
Like,
cool events. So
the Reparations Club is where it's at.
yeah.
So.
But you guys, if you're going to buy the book, I highly suggest you go over there and support the Reparation Club and grab your copy of When I Think of You. We're back Sunday night with our 200th episode of Buzzing About Romance. Myah, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Until next time, everybody, happy reading.